They say you never truly know someone until you see how they act when they think they've won everything. At 42, sitting at my own birthday dinner, surrounded by my husband of 25 years, our two adult children, and our closest friends, I watched 14 people raise their champagne glasses to toast my destruction. The mahogany table held divorce papers wrapped in a mocking red bow, while my family laughed at carefully rehearsed jokes about my worthlessness. What they didn't know, as they celebrated taking my home, my company, and my dignity, was that I had been documenting their conspiracy for 2 years. The security guard they'd hired to escort me out would later testify that he'd never seen someone sign away $30 million with such a serene smile. This is the story of how the birthday gift they gave me, my complete annihilation, became the very weapon that destroyed them all. But before we move back to it, comment down your age and where you're watching from, and if this story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about deception, betrayal, and finding the strength to reclaim your life. The October air carried a hint of frost as Claire Matthews turned her Mercedes into the circular driveway of the estate she'd called home for 15 years. The mansion's windows glowed warm against the darkening sky, each pane a promise of celebration. Today marked her 42nd birthday, though she'd been telling everyone 39 with a wink that fooled no one and charmed everyone. The white limestone facade seemed to shimmer in the landscape lighting Daniel had insisted on installing last spring, another expense she'd quietly approved from the company accounts, another detail he'd taken credit for at the country club. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing a strand of honey blonde hair that had escaped her careful updo. The diamond earrings Daniel had given her for their 20th anniversary caught the light. Strange, she thought, how he'd insisted she wear them tonight. For the photos, he'd said that morning, barely looking up from his phone. There would always be photos at her birthday dinners. Daniel made sure of that. Documentation of their perfect life, their perfect family, their perfect success. The front door stood slightly ajar, unusual for October's chill. Claire pushed it open to find the foyer dimly lit, only the chandelier on its lowest setting. No burst of surprise. No cluster of friends with champagne already flowing. Just the distant murmur of voices from the dining room and the hollow click of her heels on marble that suddenly sounded too loud. There she is, Daniel's voice carried from the dining room, but it lacked the warmth she'd expected. The birthday girl finally arrives. Claire paused at the dining room entrance, taking in the scene that would later replay in her mind with crystalline clarity. The table was set with a good china, her grandmother's Limoges pattern that she'd inherited and cherished. 14 place settings, though she counted only 12 people. Daniel sat at the head of the table, her usual spot, with their daughter Madison at his right and their son Jacob at his left. Both 20-somethings wore expressions she couldn't quite read. Madison's lips curved in what might have been a smile if it reached her eyes, while Jacob studied his water glass with the intensity of someone avoiding eye contact. Daniel's parents, Richard and Eleanor, occupied the seats closest to their son, both sitting rod straight as if prepared for a board meeting rather than a birthday dinner. Richard's fingers drummed against the table, a nervous habit she'd never seen from the retired federal judge. Eleanor's mouth was pursed in that particular way that preceded either criticism or very bad news. The Brennans were there, Tom and Patricia, their business partners from the early days when the company was just an idea sketched on coffee shop napkins. Tom wouldn't meet her eyes. Patricia twisted her napkin with manicured fingers. Their son Kyle, Jacob's best friend since middle school, sat beside them looking profoundly uncomfortable. Margaret Chen, their company's CFO and Claire's tennis partner, sat alone at the far end, her usually warm face carved from stone. Beside her, Daniel's brother Marcus nursed what appeared to be his third or fourth scotch, judging by the loose set of his shoulders. "Darling," Claire said, moving toward her usual chair only to find Daniel's briefcase occupying it. "I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late. The flower arrangement for Mom's grave took longer than expected." "How touching," Madison said, her voice carrying a brittle edge that made Claire's stomach tighten. "Still playing the devoted daughter, even to the dead." "Madison," Claire said softly, confused by the venom. They'd had their moments, what mother and daughter hadn't. but this felt different. Calculated. Is everything all right? Everything's perfect, Mom. Jacob finally looked up, and what Claire saw in her son's eyes made her step backward. It wasn't anger or sadness or even disappointment. It was satisfaction. Absolutely perfect. Daniel stood, raising his wine glass. The others followed suit mechanically, though Claire noticed Margaret's hand trembled slightly. "Before we eat," Daniel announced, "I have a special gift for my wife." He reached behind his chair and produced a folder, legal-sized, manila, tied with an obscene red velvet ribbon that someone had clearly added as an afterthought. Or a mockery. Daniel's smile was all teeth as he slid it across the mahogany toward her empty place. "Happy birthday, Claire. Here's your future." The room held its breath. Even Marcus stopped swirling his scotch. Claire felt the weight of 24 eyes upon her as she reached for the folder. The ribbon fell away with a whisper. Inside, the papers were organized with colored tabs, Daniel's compulsive need for order, even in destruction. She recognized the letterhead of Brennan, Michaels and Associates before she processed the words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Her fingers, steady from years of signing contracts and comfort letters and charity checks, turned to the next tab. Notice to quit and surrender premises. The mansion's address stared back at her in bold type. The next tab, transfer of ownership interest. The company, her company, the one she'd conceived while Daniel was still selling insurance, reassigned solely to Daniel Matthews, president and CEO. "I don't understand," she said, though understanding was already dawning like a cold sunrise. "These documents, most of them are already signed. My signature is perfectly legal." Tom Brennan finally spoke, his voice thick with something that might have been shame if Claire had been paying attention to anything but the forgeries. "Power of attorney. You signed it during the restructuring last year." "For tax purposes," Claire said slowly. "You said it was for tax purposes. Limited to the fiscal year transition." Broadly worded documents can be so useful, Richard spoke up, every inch the judge delivering a verdict. "You really should read what you sign, my dear." The laugh started with Madison, bright and sharp as breaking glass. "Oh my God, Mom, your face. You really didn't see this coming? All those lunches with your charity friends, all those spa days, and you never noticed Dad restructuring your entire life." Jacob joined in, a lower rumble that Claire had last heard when he'd made the winning goal in high school lacrosse. 30 years of marriage, and she never suspected. "Dad, you were right. She really did think she was untouchable." "The house has been in transfer for 6 months, Eleanor added, her tone conversational as if discussing wallpaper. "Daniel's been moving assets since January." "Really, Claire? Did you think you could coast forever on one good idea from 20 years ago?" Claire set down the papers with deliberate care, aligning them perfectly with the edge of the table. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice, when it came, was steady as a metronome. "The Cavendish acquisition." Daniel's smile flickered. "The Patterson lawsuit settlement. The overseas expansion that you said would bankrupt us, but netted $40 million in the first year." Claire continued, her voice never rising above conversational. "The rebranding after the data breach. The pivot to subscription services. The partnership with Chin Industries." "Ancient history." Daniel cut her off. "What have you done lately besides spend money and play the gracious wife?" Claire looked around the table, cataloging each face with the same attention she'd once given to acquisition targets. "And all of you knew. This entire dinner, this performance. You all knew." "It's business, Claire." Patricia finally spoke. "Nothing personal." "Nothing personal," Claire repeated, tasting the words like wine gone to vinegar. 20 years of friendship, and it's not personal." She picked up the pen Daniel had thoughtfully provided, her grandfather's Montblanc, she noticed, the one from her desk drawer that she'd thought she'd misplaced. With the same precise movements she'd used to sign $1,000 charity checks and million-dollar deals, she signed every document. The divorce papers, the transfer of assets, the surrender of the house. Each signature perfectly formed, each initial exactly placed. "That's it." Marcus slurred from his corner. "No tears? No begging?" No throwing wine in someone's face. Claire stood, smoothing her dress, the blue silk Daniel had picked out for her that morning. Another detail that now made sense. Why would I do that? You've all made your positions clear. Daniel raised his glass again, and the others followed more enthusiastically this time, emboldened by her apparent surrender. To freedom, he declared. To wealth. To moving on without dead weight. To freedom, they echoed, even Margaret, though Claire noticed she didn't drink. To family, Madison added, linking arms with her father. Real family. The kind that matters. Claire walked to the door with measured steps, her heels marking time on the hardwood. At the threshold, she turned back. The tableau was perfect, them united in their victory, her isolated in defeat. She smiled, the expression genuine for the first time that evening. Enjoy the house, she said. I had the septic system inspected last month. You'll want to check the report I filed. Strange findings. Tom, Patricia, you might want to review your signatures on the Brennan Partnership documents from 2019. The ones Daniel filed. Margaret, we should discuss the discrepancies in the Q3 reports when you have a moment. Though I suppose that's not my concern anymore. The silence that followed was different, uncertain rather than expectant. Happy birthday to me, Claire said, and closed the door behind her. The valet had already brought her car around. Of course he had. They'd planned even that detail. She drove steadily down the winding driveway, past the gardens she'd designed, the fountain she'd commissioned, the gates she'd had installed after the break-in Daniel had always insisted was her paranoid imagination. She made it exactly 3 miles before pulling into an empty church parking lot. There, in the darkness between streetlights, Claire Matthews allowed herself exactly 5 minutes. Her hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough to leave marks. Tears came in waves, for the children who'd chosen money over mother, for the husband who'd played a 20-year con, for the friends who'd been anything but. But only 5 minutes. She'd learned long ago from her grandmother that grief was a luxury and rage was a tool, and you had to know when to use each. She pulled out her phone. They'd probably cancel the service within hours, and opened an app hidden 3 folders deep, disguised as a meditation timer. Hundreds of files blinked back at her. Audio recordings. Photographs. Contracts. Emails. You want to play games? She whispered to the glowing screen. Let's play. The Seahorse motor squatted beside Route 47 like a relic from a more optimistic era. Its neon sign flickered between vacancy and vacancy, casting uneven pink light across a parking lot more pothole than pavement. Claire stood at the registration desk at 11:47 p.m., her blue silk dress absurdly elegant against the wood paneling and the ancient poster advertising, cable TV, air conditioning, continental breakfast. The night clerk, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and curlers, looked up from her crossword puzzle. Recognition flashed across her face. Everyone in Riverside knew the Matthews family. They'd been in the society pages just last week, another charity gala, another perfect family photograph. Rough night, hon? The woman asked, sliding a registration form across the counter without asking for ID. You could say that. Claire filled out the form with a credit card she kept in her maiden name. Old habits from her mother, who'd always said a woman should have her own money and her own options. Just a few nights. Room 237. Second floor, end of the row. Quietest one we got. The clerk handed her an actual key, not a key card. Continental breakfast is from 6 to 9, but... She glanced at Claire's designer dress and diamond earrings. The coffee's terrible. There's a decent diner 2 blocks north. Claire managed a smile. Thank you. The room smelled of industrial disinfectant and old cigarette smoke that decades of non-smoking policies couldn't quite erase. Orange curtains clashed with a green bedspread. The television was bolted to the dresser. But it was clean and it was hers, and for now that was enough. She sat on the bed's edge and kicked off her heels, $800 of Italian leather that had been a gift from Daniel for their anniversary. Or rather, a gift she'd bought and he'd presented, like so many things in their marriage. Her phone buzzed. Madison. Mom. Stop being dramatic. Just come home, and we'll talk about this like adults. Then Jacob. Dad says you have 48 hours to be reasonable before he freezes the accounts.
Delete. Delete.
Claire pulled her laptop from her purse, the one thing she'd had the foresight to keep in her car. As it booted up, she let herself remember. 2 years earlier, Daniel's home office, late evening. She'd come to bring him coffee and found him on a conference call, speaking in the smooth tones he used for hostile takeovers. The beauty is she'll never see it coming. Claire trusts me completely. We've been married 23 years. She signs whatever I put in front of her. The restructuring will be complete before she realizes she's been written out. She'd stood frozen in the hallway, coffee cooling in her hands, as Tom Brennan's voice crackled through the speaker. And you're sure the power of attorney will hold up? Richard says it's airtight. Broad enough to transfer assets, but specific enough to avoid scrutiny. By the time we're done, the company will be entirely in my name, and Claire will have what she deserves. Nothing. That night, she'd started documenting everything. The laptop screen glowed to life. Claire navigated to her cloud storage, not the family account, but one tied to an email address Daniel didn't know existed. Folders within folders, meticulously organized. Financial discrepancies. Audio recordings. Contract originals. Patent documentation. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Matthews? The voice was young, nervous. This is Alex Chun. I used to work in accounting before your husband fired me last month. Alex. She remembered him, brilliant with numbers, terrible at office politics. It's late. I know.
I'm sorry.
I heard what happened tonight. Kyle Brennan posted about it on Instagram before his parents made him take it down. Mrs. Matthews, I kept copies. Of everything. Before they fired me, I knew something wasn't right with the books. Claire closed her eyes. Why would you do that? Because you're the only executive who ever remembered my name. And because what they're doing, what they did, it's not just cruel. It's illegal. They arranged to meet the next morning at a diner 30 miles outside of town. Claire hung up and opened the first audio file, Daniel and Tom discussing how to manipulate the board into approving the asset transfer. She'd planted the recording device in Daniel's office after buying it with cash at a spy shop 3 towns over, feeling ridiculous until she'd heard the first conversation. A knock at the door made her freeze. Too late for housekeeping. Too early for anyone to have found her. She moved to the peephole. Margaret Chin stood in the hallway, still wearing her dress from dinner, but now with a coat thrown over it. She held a banker's box. Claire opened the door, but didn't invite her in. I couldn't, Margaret said without preamble. I couldn't sit there and watch that and not. She thrust the box forward. Copies of every financial document from the last 3 years. The real ones, not the versions Daniel presented to the board. Including the account in the Caymans he doesn't know I know about. You could lose everything, Claire said. Your position, your reputation. I already lost everything that mattered when I sat at that table tonight and raised my glass. Margaret's voice cracked. 20 years ago, you gave me a chance when no one else would hire a Chinese woman for a CFO position.
You mentored me.
You stood up for me against the board when they said I was too young, too inexperienced, too different. And tonight I sat there and toasted your destruction. Claire took the box. You had no choice. There's always a choice. I just made the wrong one until now. Margaret turned to leave, then paused. He's been siphoning money for 5 years, Claire. Maybe longer. The trail goes deep. Be careful. A man who can smile while destroying his wife of 25 years. There's nothing he won't do. After Margaret left, Claire spread the documents across the bed. Line items that didn't add up. Vendor payments to companies that existed only on paper. Consulting fees to firms owned by Daniel's shell corporations. It was all there in black and white, a paper trail of embezzlement dressed up as business expenses. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her personal banker, calling despite the late hour. Claire, I'm not supposed to contact you, but I've known you for 15 years. Your joint accounts will be frozen at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If you need to move any funds from your personal account, the one in your maiden name, do it tonight. Claire thanked her and immediately transferred the money to a new account at a different bank. It wasn't much. She never felt the need to hide significant assets from Daniel, but it would keep her afloat for a few months. She worked through the night, organizing evidence, creating timelines, building the framework of a case. As dawn broke through the orange curtains, she allowed herself one moment of bitter satisfaction. Daniel thought he'd won with forged signatures and legal manipulation. But he'd forgotten who had actually built the company, who knew where every body was buried, who had connections that went deeper than country club memberships and golf buddies. A new message appeared on her phone from an unknown number. Mrs. M. Heard about tonight. Your husband screwed me on the Patterson deal 3 years ago. I've been waiting for a chance to return the favor. Call me. James Patterson. Then another. Claire, it's Susan from the charity board. Just heard. Daniel doesn't know I'm on the State Commerce Committee now. We should talk. And another. Hey, Mrs. Matthews. It's Tony from Facilities. That electrical problem at the mansion tonight? I can make it happen again whenever you want. They treated you wrong. Claire looked at herself in the cracked motel mirror. Her makeup was smeared. Her grandmother's dress was wrinkled beyond salvation. She'd lost her home, her children, her supposed friends. But in their cruelty, they'd made a critical error. They'd left her with nothing to lose and everything to gain. She opened a new document on her laptop and began typing. Strategic Recovery Plan, Phase 1. The seahorse motor in's terrible coffee maker gurgled to life as she worked. Outside, Riverside was waking up to what looked like an ordinary Thursday. The society pages would run the story soon. The Matthews divorce, the scandal of it all. Let them talk. While they gossiped, she would work. While they speculated, she would prepare. Daniel had given her the birthday gift of freedom, though not in the way he intended. He'd freed her from the illusion that their life together had meant anything. He'd freed her from the burden of trusting people who deserved no trust. Most importantly, he'd freed her from any obligation to play fair. The next phase would begin in 3 hours when she met Alex Chun at the diner. She'd wore the only other outfit she had in her car, jeans and a sweater from the gym bag she always kept in the trunk. No more designer dresses and painful heels. No more playing the perfect wife. Claire Matthews was done being decoration. It was time to remind them all why she'd been the one to build an empire in the first place. As she typed, her wedding ring caught the morning light. 25 years reduced to a prop in someone else's performance. She pulled it off and set it on the nightstand. Later, she'd pawn it. For now, it could sit there, a small monument to the life that had died last night, and a promise of the resurrection to come. The Matthews mansion gleamed under the November sun like a monument to success. Daniel stood on the marble terrace, surveying the preparations for what the society pages would call the event of the season, a celebration of his newfound independence and the company's exciting restructuring. 3 weeks had passed since Claire's birthday dinner, and Daniel had spent every day since cementing his narrative, the devoted husband finally free from his parasitic wife. The ice sculpture needs to be moved. Madison directed the catering staff with the imperious tone she'd perfected at Swiss finishing school. Daddy wants it visible from every angle when the photographers arrive. The angel wings ice sculpture, Daniel's little joke about his freedom, stood 8 feet tall, already beginning to sweat in the unseasonably warm afternoon. Jacob lounged by the pool, scrolling through his phone while bartenders set up stations around him. The journal's running the profile tomorrow, he called to his father. Daniel Matthews, the architect of innovation. They bought the whole story about you carrying Mom for 20 years. Daniel's smile was practiced, presidential. The truth has a way of surfacing, son. Inside the mansion study, Richard and Eleanor Matthews held court with their son's inner circle. Tom Brennan checked his watch nervously while his wife Patricia touched up her lipstick for the 4th time. Stop fidgeting, Eleanor commanded. You're making everyone nervous. The Morrison Group pulled their contract yesterday, Tom said quietly. That's 3 major clients this week. Temporary turbulence, Richard declared with judicial authority. Once the divorce is finalized and the narrative settles, they'll come crawling back. But Tom had seen the emails. carefully worded concerns about financial irregularities and governance questions. Someone was whispering in ears, and whispers in the business world could become roars overnight. Marcus Matthews arrived late, as usual, already 3 drinks deep despite it being barely noon. "Brother," he slurred, embracing Daniel. The king of the castle, finally alone on his throne. "Not alone," Madison corrected, linking arms with her father. "He has his real family." As the guests began arriving, a careful selection of Riverside's business elite, political figures, and society mavens, Daniel worked the crowd with practiced ease. He told the story of his liberation with just enough humble suffering to seem sympathetic. Poor Daniel, carrying the dead weight of an uninvolved wife. Poor Daniel, finally free to achieve his true potential. Congressman Blake shook his hand warmly. "Unfortunate about Claire, but sometimes we must cut our losses. Speaking of which, I heard there might be some irregularities with your federal contracts." Daniel's smile never wavered. "Routine audits. Nothing of concern." But Blake's eyes were calculating. "Of course. Though you might want to check with your CFO. Margaretchen seemed quite concerned when she called my office yesterday." Daniel excused himself and found Margaret by the champagne fountain, her dress impeccable, her expression unreadable. "You called Blake's office?" "They called me," Margaret replied carefully. "Questions about vendor payments. I referred them to our legal department, of course." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggests someone has been feeding them very specific information." She took a delicate sip of champagne. "The Cayman account kind of questions." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. Only 3 people know about." "2 people," Margaret corrected. "I never knew about it, remember? According to the documentation, those transfers never happened. I certainly never signed off on them." The party continued around them, laughter and music masking the sudden chill between CEO and CFO. "You're still on my side, aren't you, Margaret?" "I'm on the side of accurate accounting," she replied and walked away, leaving Daniel to wonder if that was an answer or a threat. By the pool, Madison held court with her influencer friends, live-streaming the party to her 50,000 followers. "You can see how much happier Daddy is without the toxic energy," she narrated to her phone. "Some people," she paused dramatically, "just drain the life from everyone around them." A comment popped up immediately. "Didn't your mom design that pool? And the gardens? And basically the whole house?" Madison deleted it, but 3 more similar comments appeared. Then 10. Then dozens. She ended the stream, unsettled. Her follower count was dropping. Yesterday, it was 50,000. Today, 48,000 and falling. Inside, Jacob was having his own troubles. His trust fund, which should have been accessible now that the divorce was in process, was frozen pending review of asset origins. "It's a formality," the family lawyer assured him over the phone. "Though someone has raised questions about the initial funding sources. Something about patents that might not have been properly transferred." Jacob found his father in the wine cellar, selecting bottles for dinner. "Dad, my trust fund." "Not now," Daniel snapped, then softened. "It's nothing. Claire's pathetic attempt at revenge. It'll be cleared up by Monday." But Monday was 3 days away, and Jacob had debts. Gambling debts, the kind that didn't wait for legal formalities. His phone buzzed with another message from his bookie. 48 hours, Junior. Your daddy's money won't help if you don't pay. The party reached its crescendo as sunset approached. Daniel climbed onto a makeshift stage by the pool, raising his glass for a toast. The crowd quieted, phones raised to capture the moment. 3 weeks ago, I made the hardest decision of my life, he began. But sometimes, we must acknowledge when a partnership has become a burden. When one person carries the entire weight while another simply. The lights went out. Every light in the mansion, simultaneously. The music died. The ice sculpture's spotlights went dark. For 30 seconds, 200 guests stood in confused twilight. Then, with an electrical groan, everything flickered back on. Except the ice sculpture was melting faster now, and as it collapsed, everyone could see what had been frozen inside it. Documents, visible through the clear ice, with fraud, stamped across them in red ink. Technical difficulties. Daniel announced with forced cheer. The perils of an old house. But the photographer from the Tribune had already gotten the shot. Daniel Matthews, backed by a melting angel with fraud visible behind him. It would run on the financial page, not the society section. That night, after the guests had departed with whispered speculation, the family gathered in the study. The mood was decidedly different from 3 weeks prior. That was sabotage, Eleanor stated. Someone on the staff already fired the electrical contractor. Daniel cut her off. But the damage is done. That photo will be everywhere by morning. My follower count is down to 43,000, Madison said, staring at her phone. Someone's running a bot campaign highlighting everything Mom ever did for the company. Did you know she holds 12 patents? I didn't know that. Because it doesn't matter, Daniel insisted. I built this company. With her idea, Jacob interrupted, drunk enough to be honest. That's what everyone's saying online. That you were a mediocre insurance salesman until Mom invented the core product. The slap was sudden enough that even Eleanor gasped. Jacob touched his reddening cheek, something shifting in his eyes. Feel better, Dad? Is this how you'll handle every problem now? The investors asking questions? The board getting nervous? You going to slap them too? Get out, Daniel said quietly. Come back when you remember whose side you're on. Jacob left, but not before saying, maybe I'm starting to wonder if there are more than two sides. Alone in his study later, Daniel opened his laptop to find 17 emails from board members, all variations of concern about recent developments and reputational risks. The stock price had dropped 8% in 3 days. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The ice sculpture was creative, don't you think? But that's just the beginning. Every lie you told, every document you forged, every dollar you stole, it's all coming into the light. Enjoy your victory party. It's the last one you'll have. Daniel poured himself a scotch with hands that shook slightly. Outside, the pool lights flickered, just a moment, just enough to remind him that someone, somewhere, controlled more than he'd realized. The boardroom at Matthews Innovation Corp had been Daniel's sanctuary for a decade, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table of Italian marble he'd personally selected, walls lined with photos of him with governors, senators, and titans of industry. Now, at the emergency board meeting he'd called for damage control, it felt more like a courtroom. The stock has dropped 12% in 5 days, board member Harrison Clark announced, without preamble. We've received formal inquiries from 3 regulatory bodies. Daniel, what the hell is happening? Daniel stood at the head of the table, his usual position, but several chairs sat empty. Margaret Chen's absence was conspicuous. She'd called in sick for the first time in 5 years. A vindictive ex-wife spreading rumors, Daniel said smoothly. Nothing more. Our fundamentals are strong. Our fundamentals are being questioned by the SEC, interrupted Sandra Vega, the longest-serving board member. Someone sent them documentation about patent assignments that don't match our filings. Harrison slid a folder across the table. This arrived in my office yesterday. Courier, no return address. Daniel opened it to find photocopies of the original patent applications for their core product, all in Claire's handwriting, with her signature as sole inventor. His forgeries assigning them to himself were paper-clipped beside them, the differences obvious even to a casual observer. There must be an explanation, Richard said from his position as board advisor. My son would never. Your son needs to explain why $3 million in vendor payments went to companies that don't exist. Sandra cut him off. The FBI contacted me this morning. The FBI, Richard. The boardroom door opened, and Margaret Chen walked in, looking perfectly healthy. My apologies for being late. I was meeting with our external auditors. I thought you were sick, Daniel said. I was. Sick of lying. She placed a thick binder on the table. The board needs to see the actual books, not the versions Daniel's been presenting. I've also prepared my resignation, effective immediately after this meeting. You can't, Daniel started. I can, and I will. But first, the board deserves the truth about the Morrison, Patterson, and Shun Group contract cancellations. Margaret opened the binder. They didn't pull out because of the divorce scandal. They pulled out because someone sent them proof that Daniel was overcharging them by 40% and hiding the profits in offshore accounts. This is corporate espionage. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. No, Harrison said quietly. This is embezzlement. Sandra, I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Daniel Matthews as CEO. You need cause, Richard interjected. Legal cause, not suspicion. We have cause, Sandra replied. Margaret, tell them about the Brennan agreement. Margaret pulled out another document. 3 days ago, Tom Brennan came to me in confidence. He's been reviewing the partnership agreements from 2019 that established his firm's relationship with our company. The signatures don't match. Someone forged a signature to terms that gave Daniel personal control over partnership assets. Tom Brennan had been Daniel's ally 3 weeks ago. Now he was saving his own skin. I need a week, Daniel said. 1 week to provide full documentation. You have 24 hours, Harrison stated. The emergency shareholders meeting is tomorrow at noon. Come with answers or come with your resignation. That evening, Daniel convened his inner circle at the mansion. The room that had been full of conspirators 3 weeks ago now held only his parents, Marcus, and a reluctant Madison. Jacob hadn't returned his calls. We need those original documents destroyed, Eleanor said. If Claire has them. She has copies of everything, Daniel admitted. She must have been planning this for months. Years, maybe. So, we discredit her, Richard suggested. Mental instability. Revenge fantasy. Make her testimony worthless. Madison looked up from her phone. Dad, there's something else. Someone leaked the family trust documents to a financial blogger. The one showing that my trust fund and Jacob's were funded entirely from patents Mom filed. Daniel grabbed her phone. The blog post was titled The Real Inventor Behind Matthews Innovation, and It's Not Who You Think. It had 200,000 views in 3 hours. Kill it, he ordered. Get our lawyers. It's been reposted hundreds of times. Reddit, Twitter, financial forums. Madison's voice was small. Dad, is it true? Did Mom really invent the core product? Does it matter? Daniel snapped. Yes, Madison said, and for the first time since the birthday dinner, she looked uncertain. It matters if we destroyed her for something she created. Marcus, who'd been quietly drinking in the corner, laughed bitterly. Of course she created it. Danny Boy was selling insurance to dentists when Claire came up with the algorithm. I was there, remember? That weekend at the lake house, when she stayed up 3 nights straight coding the prototype. Shut up, Marcus.
Why?
Because the truth hurts. Marcus stood, swaying slightly. You want to know what's really funny?
Claire called me last week.
Offered me a deal. Immunity in exchange for testimony. Full immunity, Daniel. The room went cold. You didn't, Eleanor started. I haven't decided yet. Marcus headed for the door. But watching you scramble is making the decision easier. After he left, Daniel's phone rang. Tom Brennan. Don't call me again, Tom said without greeting. My lawyers have advised me to cease all contact.
And Daniel?
Patricia and I are prepared to testify that you promised us 30% of the company in exchange for our cooperation in the divorce setup. We have the emails. The line went dead. At midnight, alone in his study, Daniel opened his safe to retrieve his insurance, the real books, the documents that could explain away everything if properly presented. The safe was empty except for a single sheet of paper. Looking for something? Check your email. See. His laptop chimed. A new message, no sender address, subject line. The truth. The email contained a single link. Daniel clicked it. A website opened. The Matthews Files. Professionally designed, comprehensive, devastating. Every forged document alongside its original. Audio recordings of Daniel planning the asset theft with his lawyers. Security footage of him accessing Claire's computer with her passwords. Financial records showing the systematic looting of the company. But the worst was at the bottom. A video, date stamped from 5 years ago. Daniel in his office, on the phone. Claire's too trusting. She actually believes I love her. Once I have control of the patents, she's gone. The kids will choose money over their mother. They always do. And she'll be too broken to fight back. The website had a counter at the bottom. Public launch in 11 hours 47 minutes. Daniel called Claire's old number, knowing it was disconnected. Then her lawyer, no answer. His own lawyer picked up on the fifth ring. Have you seen? Everyone's seen it, Daniel. It was sent to the entire board, the shareholders, the SEC, the FBI, and the Journal. I'm withdrawing as your counsel effective immediately. You can't. I can't represent someone who lied to me about every aspect of their case. Good luck tomorrow. Daniel sat in the dark study, watching the counter tick down. Outside, pool lights flickered in a pattern he was beginning to recognize as mockery. Somewhere in the city, Claire was orchestrating his destruction with the same precision she'd once used to build their empire. His phone buzzed. A text from Jacob. Mom offered me a deal. Testify about the birthday dinner setup. Keep my trust fund. Dad, I have debts you don't know about. Bad debts. I'm taking the deal. Then Madison. The comments on my social media are brutal. They're calling me complicit. Some girl posted a video of me at Mom's charity event last year, talking about how she taught me everything about business. I look like a monster, Dad. I'm staying at Ashley's tonight. Daniel poured another scotch and noticed his hands were shaking. The ice sculpture at the party had been a warning he'd ignored. The flickering lights were messages he'd dismissed. But this was the kill shot. He dialed one last number. Claire's divorce attorney, Rosa Hale. Ms. Hale, I want to negotiate. Mr. Matthews, it's past midnight. I know she's listening. Tell her I'll give her everything. The house, the company, the assets. All of it. Just stop the website. Rosa's voice was professionally neutral. I'll convey your message. Though I should inform you that my client's position has evolved. She no longer wants what you took. She wants justice for how you took it. The line went dead. The counter kept ticking. Daniel Matthews sat in his empire of marble and glass, watching the digital numbers count down to his public execution. The man who'd orchestrated a perfect betrayal was learning what Claire had known all along. The only perfect crime is the one where you don't leave your victim alive to plot revenge. And Claire Matthews was very much alive. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, Daniel walked through the mansion. Every room held ghosts now. Claire choosing the paint colors, Claire designing the layout, Claire hosting parties that built the relationships he'd claimed as his own. In the kitchen, he found a sticky note she'd left on the refrigerator 3 weeks and a lifetime ago. Daniel, dinner with the Chens moved to 8. Don't forget Patricia's birthday gift. Love you. Love you. He crumpled the note, then smoothed it out again. In 25 years of marriage, how many such notes had she left? Thousands? Tens of thousands? Each one signed with casual affection he'd taken for granted, then weaponized, then destroyed. The doorbell rang at dawn. Daniel found a process server on his doorstep. Daniel Matthews? You're being sued for corporate fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. Have a nice day. Behind the process server, news vans were already gathering. The website had gone live early. Daniel's phone exploded with calls, texts, emails. The board demanding his immediate presence. Investors threatening litigation. His children asking what they should say to the media. But the only message that mattered was the one that arrived at 11:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the emergency shareholders meeting. Happy birthday, Daniel. I gave you exactly what you gave me. The future you deserve. Claire. The boardroom was packed when Daniel arrived. Harrison Clark didn't wait for him to sit down. The vote was unanimous. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Your personal items will be shipped to you, though I should warn you that federal agents have a warrant to search them first. Daniel looked around the room at faces that had once shown him deference, even fear. Now he saw only disgust and a desire to distance themselves from the wreckage. This is my company. This is Claire Matthews' company, Sandra Vega corrected. It always was. We just let you pretend otherwise. Security. As 2 guards flanked him, Daniel saw Margaret Chen sitting in his former chair. She'd been named interim CEO. The first action item on her agenda was clearly visible: Restoration of Claire Matthews as Chief Innovation Officer and majority shareholder. The last thing Daniel saw before the elevator doors closed was his own portrait being removed from the wall. The morning after Daniel's termination arrived gray and drizzling, pathetic fallacy that Claire might have appreciated if she hadn't been focused on the legal documents spread across her desk at the modest law offices of Rosa Hale and Associates. She'd moved from the Seahorse Motor into a furnished apartment downtown, anonymous and efficient. The diamonds were gone, sold to fund her war. The designer clothes had been donated. What remained was sharper, cleaner, more dangerous. "Your daughter's outside," Rosa announced from the doorway. "She's been sitting in her car for 20 minutes. Claire didn't look up from the forensic accounting report. Let her decide. Through the window, she could see Lena. She'd stopped being Madison the moment she'd laughed at that birthday dinner, gripping her steering wheel, her face a study in conflict. The girl who'd live-streamed her father's victory party now sat in a 3-year-old Honda, her BMW repossessed when the trust fund freeze expanded to all family assets, pending investigation. Finally, the car door opened. Lena walked through the rain without an umbrella, her designer boots splashing through puddles. When Rosa escorted her in, Claire saw her daughter clearly for the first time in years. Not the curated influencer or the dutiful daddy's girl, but a 23-year-old who'd just learned that every privilege she'd enjoyed came from theft. "Mom." The word came out cracked. Claire set down her pen. "If you're here to spy for your father, you should know I'm recording this conversation." "I'm not." Lena stopped, then laughed bitterly. "Of course you're recording. You've been recording everything for years, haven't you? While we thought you were just playing housewife." "I was playing housewife. I was also protecting myself." Claire pulled out a folder. "Sit down." Lena sat, and Claire pushed the folder across the desk. Inside were text messages, screenshots Daniel had sent to both children weeks before the birthday ambush. "Operation Liberation." Lena read aloud. "Kids, your mother has become dead weight. If we work together, we can free ourselves and secure your futures. She trusts you completely. Use that." Her hands shook. He called it an operation. Like you were an enemy to be eliminated. "You were 23 years old," Claire said evenly. "Old enough to know better." "He said you'd never contributed anything. That you'd been bleeding the company dry with your charities and social climbing. He showed us spreadsheets. Forged spreadsheets." "I know that now." Lena pulled out her phone, scrolling to a saved folder. "Mom, I've been documenting things too. Not for years like you, but after the party when everything started falling apart, Dad got paranoid.
Mean.
He made me and Jacob do things." She showed Claire a video. Daniel in his study at 2 a.m., drunk, directing Lena to create fake social media accounts to spread rumors about Claire's mental health. "Make it believable," his voice slurred from the phone. Concerned daughter worried about mom's breakdown. "Use that photo from the charity gala where she looked tired. Say she was mixing pills and wine." "I didn't post them," Lena said quickly. "I couldn't, but I kept recording. Every instruction. Every lie he wanted us to spread." Rosa leaned forward. "That's witness intimidation and conspiracy to commit defamation. With this evidence, you could face charges yourself unless I cooperate," Lena finished. "I know. That's why I'm here." Claire studied her daughter's face. "What else do you have?" Lena pulled out a flash drive. "Dad doesn't know I have a master's in data analytics. He just thought I was playing with computers for my Instagram metrics. This drive has everything from his personal cloud storage. He used my laptop once when his was updating, forgot to log out." Rosa inserted the drive into her secured laptop. File after file appeared. Shell company registrations, cryptocurrency transfers, even a recorded Zoom call where Daniel explicitly instructed Tom Brennan to forge Claire's signatures. "This is enough to add 10 years to his sentence," Rosa said. "There's more," Lena said, her voice stronger now. "The Cayman account? There's a second one in Switzerland. Dad opened it in my name when I turned 18, said it was for tax purposes. He's been using it to hide money from the IRS." Claire felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy but recognition. Her daughter had been groomed for this complicity since childhood. "What do you want, Lena?" I want to make it right. Or as right as it can be. Lena met her mother's eyes. I want to testify.
Publicly.
Let everyone know what we did to you and how wrong it was. Your father will destroy you. He already has. My influencer career is over. I lost 90% of my followers when the Matthews files went live. My friends won't return my calls. Ashley's parents asked me to leave their house because they don't want to be associated with the scandal. Lena's voice cracked. But that's not even the worst part. She pulled up another message on her phone, this one from 6 months ago. It's from Grandma Chen, your mom. She was asking if I'd like to learn the family dumpling recipe before she got too sick to teach me. I never responded. I was too busy being daddy's princess to care about my dying grandmother's recipes. Claire's composure finally cracked, just slightly. Her mother had passed 2 months ago. Lena hadn't come to the funeral. She left you her pearl necklace anyway, Claire said quietly. I don't deserve it. No, you don't. But she believed in redemption. Even for those who don't deserve it. Rosa cleared her throat. If Lena cooperates fully, we can petition for immunity on the conspiracy charges. She'll have to testify before the grand jury, possibly in open court. I'll do it, Lena said immediately. But Mom, there's something else. Jacob's in trouble. Real trouble. Claire's second fracture. What kind of trouble? He owes money to some very bad people. $100,000. Dad got him into high-stakes poker games with his business associates, but when the scandal broke, they turned into different kinds of creditors. The kind that break bones. And Daniel won't pay? Dad can't pay. All his accounts are frozen. Jacob's been hiding at his friend's cabin upstate, but they'll find him. They always do. Claire stood and walked to the window. Below, the city went about its morning routine, oblivious to the family drama playing out in a law office above. She thought about Jacob at 5, insisting on giving his allowance to a homeless man. At 10, crying when they'd had to put down the family dog. At 15, the last time he'd said he loved her without being prompted. Rosa set up a meeting with Jacob. Secure location. And contact those creditors. Offer them full payment plus 20% interest in exchange for a clean slate and their silence. You don't have to, Lena started. Yes, I do. He's my son. That doesn't change just because he forgot it. Claire turned back to face them. But he testifies. Everything. The planning, the execution, the aftermath. No protection, no softening. He tells the truth, or he's on his own. Lena nodded.
He will. He's scared, Mom.
Really scared. Not just of the creditors. Of becoming dad. That afternoon, in a conference room at the FBI field office, Claire sat beside Rosa as Lena gave her formal statement. 2 federal agents took notes while a video camera recorded everything. My father called it Operation Liberation, Lena began, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. He said my mother was a parasite who'd been living off his success for 25 years. He showed us falsified documents that made it look like she'd been embezzling from the company. He said if we didn't help him, we'd lose everything when she was exposed. Did you believe him? Agent Harrison asked. I wanted to. It was easier than admitting my father was a monster, and I was helping him. Lena looked directly at the camera. On October 15th, my mother's birthday, we executed a plan we'd rehearsed for 3 weeks. Every word, every gesture, every cruel laugh, all scripted by my father. She went through it all. The forged signatures, the hidden assets, the media campaign planned to destroy Claire's reputation, the bribes to household staff for information, the installation of tracking software on Claire's devices. This USB drive contains everything, Lena said, sliding it across the table, including communications between my father and Judge Richard Matthews, his father, discussing how to manipulate the legal system to prevent my mother from fighting back. Agent Harrison's expression darkened. Judge Matthews was involved? He reviewed every document, suggested which judges to file with, told Dad exactly how to structure everything to appear legal while being completely fraudulent. Lena pulled out her phone. I recorded him coaching Dad on what to say if questioned. The recording played, Richard's cultured voice explaining how to claim mental instability without creating liability, how to imply financial incompetence without defamation, how to destroy someone while keeping your hands technically clean. Your grandfather could be disbarred for this, Agent Harrison said. Possibly imprisoned. Good, Lena said flatly. He taught his son that women were property to be managed. He deserves whatever's coming. That evening, Jacob arrived at the safe house Rosa had arranged, a nondescript apartment building with security cameras and controlled access. He looked gaunt, unshaven, nothing like the golden boy who'd laughed at his mother's devastation 6 weeks prior. "Mom," he said, and then seemed to run out of words. Claire didn't embrace him.
Sit. Talk.
"Tell me everything or leave now." Jacob sat and began to speak. The words came in rushes and pauses. How Daniel had been grooming him since middle school to see his mother as weak, manipulative, less than. How he'd been rewarded for coldness toward her and punished for showing affection. How the gambling had started as father-son bonding at private games before spiraling into addiction. He said real men take risks. Jacob's voice was hollow. Real men don't let emotions cloud their judgment. Real men don't need their mothers. And you believed him? I wanted his approval more than anything. More than truth. More than you. Jacob looked at his hands. The night of your birthday, after you left, he opened a bottle of champagne that cost more than most people make in a month. He said, "Now you're truly my son." And for about 5 minutes, I felt proud. Then Lena threw up in the bathroom. Grandma Eleanor said it was probably relief that you were finally gone. And I realized we weren't celebrating. We were desecrating something. Rosa had been taking notes. The FBI will want to hear about the financial structures your father used. I'll tell them everything. Jacob pulled out a battered notebook. I kept track of the gambling connections. Some of these people, they're not just criminals. They're connected to money laundering operations Dad was using to hide assets. He thought he was smart, using criminal networks that couldn't go to the authorities. He didn't realize they keep better records than the IRS. Claire processed this. You have documentation of Daniel's connections to organized crime? Names, dates, amounts, including a payment to a city inspector to overlook code violations at the warehouse property. Jacob slid the notebook across the table. Dad taught me to document everything. Guess that lesson backfired. The creditors, Claire began. Rosa already wired them the money, Jacob interrupted. I'm clear. But Mom, I need you to know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want to help fix what I helped break.
Claire stood.
You can start by getting clean. The gambling stops. Complete transparency on all finances. Therapy, real therapy, not the yes man Dad was paying. And you testify to everything. Agreed. And Jacob, you and Lena will repay every cent I spent saving you from those creditors. Not from your trust funds. Those will be liquidated for restitution to the company employees Dad cheated. From your own earnings. However long it takes. Yes, ma'am. For the first time since that birthday dinner, Claire saw a glimpse of the boy she'd raised before Daniel poisoned him against her. The podcast studio was intimate. Just Claire, the host Sarah Chen, no relation to Margaret, and 2 microphones in a soundproofed room. Outside, her security detail waited. The death threats had started coming after Lena's testimony leaked. This is American Scandal, and I'm your host, Sarah Chen. Today, we're sitting with Claire Matthews, the woman at the center of what financial reporters are calling the most audacious corporate fraud scheme of the decade. Claire, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me, Sarah. Let's start with the birthday dinner. You've been notably silent while the media has dissected every aspect of that night. Can you tell us what was going through your mind when you realized your entire family had conspired against you? Claire considered her words carefully. Clarity. For years, I'd sensed something was wrong, but told myself I was being paranoid. That night, the mask came off. In a way, it was almost a relief to stop pretending we were a happy family. You'd been recording your husband's conversations for 2 years before that night. Some people say that proves you were planning this takedown all along. I was protecting myself. The first recording was an accident. I'd left my phone recording a voice memo in my purse when Daniel came into my office. When I played it back, I heard him on a call discussing how to transfer assets without my knowledge. After that, yes, I was deliberate about documenting everything. The FBI has now confirmed that Daniel Matthews embezzled over $30 million from the company you co-founded. How did he hide it for so long? He didn't hide it. He normalized it. Claire's voice hardened. Every questionable transaction was presented as standard business. Every forged document was mixed with legitimate ones. He counted on people trusting him and on me being too focused on the creative side of the business to scrutinize the finances. But you did scrutinize them. Eventually. The turning point was finding out he'd registered patents in his name alone. Patents for products I'd invented in our garage while he was still selling insurance. That's when I hired a forensic accountant. Quietly. Let's talk about your children's involvement. Claire's composure slipped slightly. They were victims too, in a way. Daniel had been conditioning them since childhood to see me as weak, frivolous, unnecessary. He tied their self-worth to his approval and their financial security to his success. By the time they were adults, they were primed to believe any narrative he presented. Yet they participated in your humiliation. Your daughter live-streamed, mocking you. Your son called you pathetic. Yes. The word came out sharp and final. Being a victim of manipulation doesn't absolve you of your choices. They're adults. They chose cruelty. Both have now testified against their father. Lena's testimony was particularly damaging. She revealed the existence of Swiss accounts that added tax evasion to Daniel's charges. How do you feel about their cooperation? Grateful for the truth. Wary of their motives. Hopeful for their futures. Claire paused. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a process. We're at the beginning of that process. Sarah shuffled her notes. The board of Matthews Innovation has offered you the CEO position. You declined and accepted Chief Innovation Officer instead. Why? Because I know what I'm good at. I create. I innovate. I solve problems. The day-to-day operations, the politics, the schmoozing, that was always Daniel's arena. Margaret Chen is a brilliant CEO. The company is in good hands. Speaking of Margaret Chen, she's revealed that she was feeding you information throughout this ordeal. Was anyone else secretly helping you? More people than Daniel realized. The driver who gave me access to his files. The housekeeper who recorded his conversations. The IT contractor who documented his digital fraud. People he dismissed as servants, as beneath notice. They saw everything, and when the time came, they remembered every slight, every unpaid overtime, every casual cruelty. Judge Richard Matthews was arrested yesterday on charges of conspiracy and judicial misconduct. Your former mother-in-law Eleanor is under investigation for tax fraud. The entire Matthews dynasty is crumbling. Do you take satisfaction in that? Claire was quiet for a long moment. I take satisfaction in justice. But watching your children's grandparents be led away in handcuffs? There's no joy in that. Only sadness that it was necessary. Daniel's trial starts next month. Will you testify? Every day of it. Are you concerned for your safety? The threats have been serious enough to warrant FBI protection. Daniel cultivated relationships with dangerous people. Some of them lost money when his schemes collapsed. They blame me for exposing him. Claire's smile was sharp. Let them come. I've survived worse than angry criminals. I survived 25 years of psychological warfare disguised as marriage. After the podcast, Claire met with a federal prosecutor, Jennifer Russo, a woman who reminded her of herself, sharp, prepared, unforgiving of men who underestimated her. We've added RICO charges, Jennifer announced. The connections between Daniel's embezzlement and the money laundering operations are solid. We're looking at 20 to 30 years. He'll plea bargain, Claire predicted. He's trying. His lawyer called this morning offering full cooperation for 10 years. Jennifer's smile was predatory. I countered with 20.
Non negotiable.
Rosa pulled up a news alert on her phone. Speaking of Daniel, the headline read, Daniel Matthews attempts suicide in federal detention. Claire's blood went cold, then hot, then cold again. Rosa was already calling for confirmation. He's alive, she reported minutes later. Superficial wounds. The psychologist says it was likely manipulative rather than genuine, an attempt to garner sympathy before trial. Of course it was, Claire said, surprised by her own lack of feeling. Daniel would never actually harm himself. He loves himself too much for that. That evening, Claire attended a support group meeting, not as a victim, but as a speaker. The room was full of women and some men who'd been economically abused by their partners. She stood at the podium in a simple black dress, no jewelry except her grandmother's pearl necklace that she'd reclaimed from storage. 6 months ago, my husband stole everything from me in front of our children, our friends, and his parents. They laughed as I signed fraudulent documents. They toasted my destruction with champagne that I'd chosen in a house I designed, celebrating the theft of a company I'd created. The room was silent, captivated. I drove to a motel that night with nothing but the clothes on my back and a laptop in my car. I thought about ending everything for about 5 minutes. Then I got angry. Not the hot anger that burns out quickly. The cold anger that sustains you through long nights of planning. Several people nodded in recognition. I'm not here to tell you that revenge will heal you. It won't. I'm not here to say that justice equals recovery. It doesn't. I'm here to tell you that surviving is not enough. You have to thrive. You have to take back not just what was stolen, but the right to define yourself. How? A woman in the back called out. Document everything. Trust carefully. Lawyer up properly. Not the cheap divorce attorney, but someone who understands financial abuse. And never, ever underestimate the power of patience. Claire looked around the room. Your abuser counted on you being too broken to fight back. Prove them wrong. Not for them. For you. After the meeting, Claire returned to her apartment. It was smaller than the pool house at the mansion, but it was hers. Every piece of furniture chosen by her. Every book on the shelf one she wanted to read. Every photograph one that brought actual joy, not manufactured memories. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Grandma Chen's cookbook arrived from the estate. Could we maybe cook together sometime? Then Jacob. First GA meeting tonight. 60 days clean. 1 day at a time. And finally Margaret Chen. The company just landed the Singapore contract. The one Daniel said was impossible. Your innovation, my implementation. We make a good team. Claire poured herself a glass of wine. Not the expensive vintages Daniel had insisted on, but a simple Pinot she actually enjoyed. Outside, the city lights sparkled with possibility.
Her phone rang.
An unknown number. Claire Matthews? The voice was male, nervous. Yes, this is Tom Brennan. I know I have no right to call you. I just wanted to say,
I'm sorry.
Patricia and I are both sorry. We betrayed 20 years of friendship for money. There's no excuse. No, there isn't. We're testifying for the prosecution. Full cooperation. Daniel threatened us if we didn't participate in his plan, but that doesn't excuse our choices. Claire was quiet for a moment. Tom, did you ever actually like me? Or was I always just Daniel's wife to you? His answer took a long time coming. You were the one who remembered our anniversary every year. You sent flowers when Patricia's mother died. You offered to invest in Kyle's startup when everyone else said he was too young. You were our friend, Claire. We just forgot that when it mattered most. Goodbye, Tom. Goodbye, Claire. And thank you for not destroying us completely. You could have. I still might, Claire said, not unkindly, and hung up. She opened her laptop to review the next day's schedule. A meeting with the patent office to properly register her new innovations. Lunch with 3 female entrepreneurs she was mentoring. An afternoon session with the company's development team to review the product pipeline. At the bottom of her inbox was an email from Daniel's lawyer. My client wishes to meet with you before the trial. He has information about hidden assets he's willing to exchange for a letter of support to the judge. Claire typed a response. Your client had 25 years to meet with me. He chose betrayal instead. I'll see him in court. She hit send and closed the laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The trial would be brutal. The media attention exhausting. The recovery of money trust, family would take years. But tonight, Claire Matthews sat in her own space, drinking her own wine, living her own life. The woman they'd tried to erase was not only visible, but undeniable. The victim they'd laughed at had become the architect of their downfall. And she was just getting started. The federal courthouse stood like a fortress of justice against the December sky, its limestone columns indifferent to the media circus assembled on its steps. Claire arrived at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the proceedings, entering through a secure underground entrance to avoid the cameras. Day 3 of Daniel's trial had promised to be explosive. The forensic accountant was scheduled to testify. In the prosecution's war room, Jennifer Russo laid out the day's strategy with military precision. "We've mapped every shell company, every transfer, every falsified document. But I need you ready for cross-examination. Daniel's team will try to paint you as a vindictive ex-wife." "Let them try," Claire said, reviewing her notes. "The numbers don't lie, even if everyone else did." The courtroom was packed. Daniel sat at the defense table in a gray suit that hung loose on his frame. Federal detention had whittled away his country club physique. His father, Richard, was notably absent, having been denied bail as a flight risk. Eleanor sat in the gallery's front row, her face a mask of bitter dignity. The forensic accountant, Dr. Sarah Winters, took the stand with the confidence of someone who'd spent 30 years unraveling financial crimes. Jennifer guided her through the evidence methodically. "Dr. Winters, can you explain the scope of the embezzlement?" Over 7 years, Mr. Matthews systematically diverted $47.3 million from Matthews Innovation Corp. Through a network of shell companies. The money was then laundered through real estate purchases, art acquisitions, and cryptocurrency transfers. She clicked through a presentation showing the money's path, a spider web of transactions designed to obscure the theft. "This level of sophistication," Dr. Winters continued, "requires extensive planning and intimate knowledge of the company's financial systems. It also requires forged signatures on 147 separate documents." Daniel's attorney, Martin Cross, stood for cross-examination. "Dr. Winters, isn't it true that Claire Matthews had equal access to these systems?" "She had access, yes. But the digital forensics show all fraudulent transactions originated from Mr. Matthews' devices, using his login credentials, during times when Mrs. Matthews was provably elsewhere." "Provably?" "Credit card records, security footage, cell phone GPS data. For instance, on March 15th, when $3 million was transferred to a Cayman account, Mrs. Matthews was at a charity board meeting with 17 witnesses." Cross tried another angle. "These transactions you claim are fraudulent. Weren't they approved by the board?" "The board approved documents that had been altered after their review. We have the original PDFs from board members' emails and the filed versions. 63 instances of post-approval manipulation." In the gallery, Claire noticed Tom Brennan shifting uncomfortably. He was scheduled to testify tomorrow, and the weight of his betrayal was visible in his slumped shoulders. That afternoon, the prosecution played audio recordings, Daniel's voice, clear and damning, instructing his accomplices to destroy evidence. "Make sure Claire's signatures look authentic. She has that little flourish on her C's, don't forget it. If anyone asks, she was involved in every decision. We need plausible deniability. The patents are the key. Once we establish I'm the sole inventor, everything else falls into place." Eleanor stood abruptly and left the courtroom. The image of her son's guilt, undeniable in his own voice, was too much even for her steel spine. During recess, Daniel's legal team approached Jennifer Russo with another plea offer. Claire watched from across the hallway as Jennifer listened, then shook her head. The offer had been rejected. Daniel caught Claire's eye across the corridor. For a moment, his mask slipped, revealing something that might have been regret or might have been rage. Then his lawyer whispered in his ear, and the mask returned. The afternoon brought Jacob to the stand. Claire's son looked older than his 25 years, the weight of his choices carved into premature lines around his eyes. "Mr. Matthews," Jennifer began gently, aware of the delicate dynamics, "can you describe your father's plan for the birthday dinner?" Jacob's voice was steady but quiet. We rehearsed it for 3 weeks. Every word was scripted. Dad had us practice our reactions, when to laugh, when to look disgusted, when to turn away. He said it had to be perfect, that Mom needed to believe everyone had turned against her. Did you believe your mother had done something wrong? I wanted to believe it. Dad showed us documents that seemed to prove she'd been stealing from the company. Now I know he forged them, but at the time, Jacob paused.
No.
That's a cop-out. Part of me knew something was wrong. Mom had never taken anything that wasn't hers in her entire life. But I chose to believe Dad because it was easier than standing up to him. Cross approached for his cross-examination. Mr. Matthews, isn't it true you're testifying to avoid prosecution for your own crimes? I have an immunity agreement, yes. So, you're saying whatever the prosecution wants to hear. Jacob straightened. I'm telling the truth. Finally. My father is a criminal who destroyed our family for money and control. That's not what the prosecution wants to hear. It's what happened. You seem very angry with your father. I'm angry with myself. Dad just gave me the rope. I'm the one who hanged my mother with it. That evening, Claire met with Margaret Chun at the office. The company was thriving under Margaret's leadership, stock prices recovering and even climbing beyond pre-scandal levels. The Singapore contract is finalized, Margaret reported. And Tokyo wants to discuss expansion. The world still wants what you create, Claire. What we create, Claire corrected. I've learned the value of good partners. Margaret hesitated. There's something else. Daniel's hidden asset. The one he mentioned in his plea negotiation? We found it. A patent application filed in Switzerland under a shell company. It's for your latest innovation, the one you developed last year. Claire's blood ran cold. How did he even know about it? He must have had spyware on your devices deeper than we realized. But here's the thing, the application has errors. Technical errors only someone without full understanding would make. It's invalid, but if it had gone through, he would have owned my work. Again. Claire stood, pacing to the window. File the correct application immediately. And have IT do another sweep of all systems. Her phone buzzed. Lena. Grandma Eleanor is in the hospital. Heart attack. Claire stared at the message. The woman who'd raised her husband to be a monster, who'd sat at that birthday dinner and laughed at her humiliation, was possibly dying. She felt nothing. Then, a slight pang. Not for Eleanor, but for the idea of Eleanor, the grandmother her children had now lost to greed and cruelty. The verdict came on a Thursday morning that felt like the edge of the world. Claire sat in the courtroom's third row, having refused the prosecution's offer of a front-row seat. She didn't need to be close to watch Daniel fall. On the count of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of embezzlement, guilty. On the count of money laundering, guilty. On the count of racketeering, guilty. 37 counts in total. Guilty on all. Daniel stood stoically as the verdicts were read, but Claire saw his hands trembling against the defense table. His empire of lies had collapsed entirely, leaving him exposed as nothing more than a common thief with an expensive education. Judge Patricia Stern, notably not from Richard Matthews' circle, set sentencing for the following month. The defendant will remain in federal custody. Given the severity of the crimes and the risk of flight, bail is denied. As marshals prepared to lead Daniel away, he turned to scan the gallery. His eyes found Claire, and he mouthed something that might have been, "I'm sorry," or might have been, "You'll pay." She would never know which, and found she didn't care. Outside the courthouse, Jennifer Russo addressed the media, while Claire slipped away through a side exit. She had no interest in gloating publicly. The victory was hollow. She'd won back what should never have been stolen, defeated a man who should have been her partner. Her phone rang. Lena. Mom, Grandma Eleanor died an hour ago. Dad doesn't know yet. Claire sat in her car, processing this. How do you feel? Empty. Like I should feel more, but can't. She was cruel to you, cruel to us in different ways. But she was still Grandma. We'll arrange a dignified funeral, Claire said. Whatever else she was your grandmother. Dad won't be able to attend.
No.
He won't. The funeral was small. Richard was permitted to attend under martial supervision, his hands shackled even in grief. He looked decades older, his judicial bearing replaced by the slouch of a broken man. Claire paid for everything: the casket, the service, the burial plot beside Eleanor's parents. Not out of forgiveness, but out of principle. The living owed certain courtesies to the dead. Jacob and Lena flanked their mother during the service. When Richard approached after, Claire stepped between him and her children. "You have nothing to say to them that doesn't go through lawyers," she said quietly. "They're my grandchildren. They're my children. And you helped their father destroy their mother. You have no claim here." Richard's eyes filled with tears, rage or sorrow. Claire couldn't tell. "You've won. Isn't that enough?" "I haven't won anything."
"I've survived."
"There's a difference." A month later, at Daniel's sentencing, the courtroom was nearly empty. The media had moved on to newer scandals. Claire sat with Rosa, watching as her ex-husband was brought in, shackled at wrists and ankles. Judge Stern was methodical in her reasoning. "Mr. Matthews, you didn't just steal money. You betrayed the most fundamental trusts: marital, parental, fiduciary. You weaponized your children against their mother. You turned a birthday celebration into a cruel theater of humiliation. The psychological damage you've inflicted may never fully heal." She paused, looking directly at Daniel. "This court sentences you to 23 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You will pay full restitution to Matthews Innovation Corp. And separately to Claire Matthews for the personal assets you stole. Your legal license is permanently revoked." Daniel's lawyer asked to approach. There was hushed conversation. Then Judge Stern addressed Claire directly. "Mrs. Matthews, the defendant has requested a moment to address you. You're under no obligation to listen." Claire stood. "He can speak." Daniel turned, his orange jumpsuit a far cry from his tailored suits. "Claire, his voice cracked. "I need you to know that it started as something small. Just moving some money to avoid taxes. Then it grew and I couldn't stop. The lies became the truth in my head. I convinced myself you really were the enemy." "Is that supposed to be an apology?" Claire asked. "It's an explanation." "I don't need your explanation, Daniel. I needed a husband. Our children needed a father. Your parents needed a son who wasn't a criminal. You failed all of us. The children are no longer your concern. Focus on surviving prison. I hear white-collar criminals don't do well in general population." It was cruel, perhaps, but Claire found she had no kindness left for the man who'd orchestrated her destruction. 6 months after the trial, Claire stood in the renovated offices of Matthews Innovation Corp., now officially renamed Catalyst Innovations. The rebranding was complete, erasing Daniel's legacy from everything except the legal documents that would forever memorialize his crimes. Margaret Chen had assembled the entire staff in the main conference room. Claire looked out at the faces, some who'd been there from the beginning, others hired to replace those who'd participated in Daniel's schemes. Today, Claire announced, "We're implementing an employee profit-sharing program. 15% of all profits will be distributed among staff, proportional to tenure and contribution." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. "Additionally," Margaret added, "we're establishing a fund for employees who were underpaid during the previous management. Full back pay plus interest." Tony, the facilities manager who'd offered to sabotage Daniel's party, raised his hand. "Mrs. Matthews, why? You don't owe us anything." "Yes, I do," Claire replied. "You stayed loyal when it would have been easier to side with power. You protected me when I didn't even know I needed protection. This company was built on innovation, but it survives on integrity. That's what you gave us." That evening, Claire hosted dinner at the mansion. She'd won it back in the asset recovery but had gutted and renovated it completely. No trace of the birthday dinner remained in the dining room. New table, new chairs, new paint that covered whatever psychic stains lingered. Lena and Jacob arrived together, both looking healthier than they had in years. Jacob was 15 months clean, working as an addiction counselor while finishing his interrupted degree. Lena had abandoned influencer culture entirely, returning to school for data science, her Instagram account deleted without fanfare. They cooked together, Grandma Chen's dumpling recipe that Lena had finally learned, vegetables from the garden Claire had replanted, wine from a local vineyard rather than Daniel's pretentious collection. "Mom," Jacob said as they worked, "I've been thinking about changing my name. Not Matthews anymore. Maybe your maiden name?" Claire paused in her chopping. "That's a big decision. Matthews means fraud now. It means betrayal."
I don't want to carry that.
"I kept Matthews," Claire pointed out. "Not because of Daniel, but because it's the name I built my career under. The name on the patents. I refuse to let him take that from me, too. But you're strong enough to rehabilitate it." "I'm not. Not yet." Lena nodded. "I'm keeping it for now, but professionally, I go by L. Chin Matthews, honoring both grandmothers." They ate quietly for a while, the ghost of their former family dynamic hovering, but not overwhelming. They were building something new, careful and fragile, but real. "I saw Tom Brennan yesterday," Lena mentioned, "at the coffee shop. He tried to apologize. And I told him some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. He cried." "Good," Jacob said flatly. "He should cry every day for what he did." Claire studied her children. The cruelty was gone, replaced by something harder but cleaner, an understanding of consequences, of the weight of choices. "Forgiveness isn't for them," she said finally. "It's for us. When we're ready. If we're ever ready." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that she recognized anyway. Daniel had found a way to communicate from prison. "Please let me explain. I loved you once. That has to count for something." She showed it to her children. "Block it," Lena said immediately. "Report it," Jacob added. "He's not supposed to have phone access." Claire deleted the message and blocked the number. "He can love me from prison. 23 years of love, just like the 23 years of marriage he destroyed." Later, alone in her study, Claire worked on new innovations. The computer screen glowed with possibilities, sustainable technologies, educational platforms, medical devices that could change lives. Each idea was hers, indisputably, protected by patents filed in her name alone. A knock at the door interrupted her. Lena entered with a cup of tea. "Mom, there's something I never told you." That night, at the birthday dinner, just before you arrived, Dad made a toast. He said, "To the end of an era and the beginning of an empire." Everyone raised their glasses, except me. I pretended to drink, but didn't. "Why?" "Because I saw the portrait of you in the hallway, the one from your MIT graduation. You looked so young, so brilliant, so ready to change the world. And I thought, we're about to destroy the person who actually built the empire." I still participated. I still chose wrong. But I wanted you to know that some part of me knew it was wrong even then. Claire pulled her daughter into an embrace, the first real one since that horrible night. "We all make choices," she whispered. "The good news is we get to keep making them. Choose better tomorrow." As midnight approached, Claire stood on the mansion's balcony, looking out over the city lights. The house was quiet, her children asleep in their old rooms, stripped of designer excess and filled with their actual interests. Tomorrow would bring board meetings, patent filings, the constant work of rebuilding. But tonight, she had this, a home reclaimed, children recovering, a company reborn. The woman they'd tried to erase stood exactly where they'd tried to bury her, stronger for having clawed her way back. Her phone showed one last message, this time from Margaret Chin. "The Tokyo deal closed. We're going international. Your innovations are about to change the world, Claire. The real empire starts now." Claire smiled, not the polite smile of a corporate wife or the bitter smile of revenge, but something genuine and forward-looking. They'd taken everything on her birthday. She'd taken it all back and more. Not through cruelty, but through truth. Not through betrayal, but through patience. The birthday gift Daniel had given her, freedom, had turned out to be exactly what she'd needed. Freedom from illusions. Freedom from false love. Freedom to build something better from the ashes of what they'd burned. She raised her wine glass to the night sky. "Happy birthday to me," she whispered and meant it. If someone you trusted completely offered you everything you'd ever wanted in exchange for destroying an innocent person, would you take the deal? Or would you wonder why they needed you to help them win? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the price of betrayal and the power of patient revenge.